I wanted to share some interesting work that I'm doing that I think is pretty interesting. And there's a lot of levels to it, and part of what I wanted to share is the levels themselves. Now, the trigger for this was watching this guy move around and explaining some of the levels that got me to this point, which is just a step in creating a, maybe the number is going to be variable, but 12 or 13 site dash gauge pod, daughter dash add-on, if you will. It's going to be a multi-piece 3D print part that goes above here. You can see the spline line is sort of indicative of how that's going to look. So some of the levels. There's a lot of stories involved with 3D scanning this dash. 3 different cars contributed to the form of this dash. This is also a non-finished temporary state. I do intend on making a much more perfected part for this dash. But this is pretty awesome as is, and much better than anything you can find online with scouring the web for 3D models, which I've done and found that they're pretty inaccurate. So 3D scanning is a new thing I've been getting into, and reverse engineering. So I modeled up these gauges, and I just went in and added this construction line to each of them, and I mated those in an assembly to, can you see it? This point right here. This point is special. It represents the focal point of the driver's eyes. And I'm going to have, I'm going to have each of these gauges pointing to that focal point. So currently, these aren't all mated. No matter where I move this, it's going to be line of sight to that focal point. Cool. So then I can mate each gauge start of that line to this spline, and then they are like this guy where they follow it. One thing though, you can't just in CAD do what you it takes a lot of thought to get to where you want to go, and you sort of gotta think about and plan before you act. Like, you can't do all of what you see here in one part or one assembly, and so it becomes a hierarchy of parts and assemblies, and then a hierarchy of how many assemblies, and then your relations between parts and assemblies exist on which part and which assemblies. It kind of reminds me of classical composition, most utilized in painting, where once I learned, I've been an artist all my life, so once I learned classical composition, I then began to look at a canvas probably longer than I would spend painting on the canvas, to the point where I would often decide not to begin painting, because the idea of coming up with a plan was so difficult, because you can shoot things down and it's hard to be creative knowing all of the restrictions required to see the composition to success. Because then you learn that art has structure, and then you start judging art that you can see clearly has no structure. For me, there was no going back at that point. Where that relates to something like designing car parts is, having a good plan so that you have an intelligent model that will take the least amount of time to get to your result and to get to a successful result. There's, if I showed you my assembly tree here, there are multiple levels to this that I've backed out on. I can create as many, you know, and create new assemblies and delete them and change my path. And currently I'm excited about this. So let's get into it a little bit. This dot, this focal point, how did I even get that? How do I know that that's accurate? And then also, how do you even, I know this is such an underrated thing. Most people probably would never think about it, but just your initial coordinate system with any 3D scan, it's one of the most difficult things in all of 3D scanning and reverse engineering that I could possibly think of. And if you think about it, that it might be hard to come to that conclusion. With my 3D mouse, I like to snap to nice orthogonal views, but that's something you take for granted. When you build up a model in CAD, you have that from the start. It's the opposite with 3D scanning and reverse engineering. So how accurate is your coordinate system that you create? I don't think I'll, on my main car project here, which I'm about to show, I'm not sure how accurate it'll ever get to. But I've gotten to a point of decent accuracy that I can use a fair amount of engineering logic to corroborate that it's pretty close. And so with hierarchies of assemblies, I just simply have this series of models and assemblies in my master assembly. Let's have a look at that. Side note, this is a model I found for free online. I think SolidWorks is having a little issue displaying it here. Graphical error. I was going to show you a difference between sedan and wagon. Anyway, model is terribly inaccurate. I do know that my 3D scan model that's over 80 scans combined with many months of work is far more accurate than that. And so I found two models online, and they both had dashes. They were both incredibly off. However, that sedan, I did use its driver's seat to help create this dot. It's not showing at the moment, but anyway, oh, there we go. Since I didn't model the seats in my car, you know, I had a view on the side, then I had a view from behind, and in a 3D sketch, just a 3D sketch of just one dot in a 3D sketch in the right assembly gave me my focal point. Pretty important. I can edit it later. And the key thing about all of this is design decisions where they are editable down the road. So once I make a very complex gauge pod, I will still have it all update just by moving that dot, as well as other updates. I'll move any little position on this spline and everything will update. The worst thing you could do is make a model that you spent so much time on and all of the design criteria is fixed and you can't change anything later. So creating constraints wherever you can while still having freedom in all the places you could possibly want it. Quick look at some of my model here because there's nothing I can't show. I'm working on, you can see some of my reverse engineered parts here. The suspension I'm working on. This is all movable and accurate. Pretty exciting. Enough of that though. So yeah, put this series of assemblies in my master assembly just to position this, and then when I go back, actually that was the wrong level. See, I have multiple, I'm gonna lose track here. They look identical. I have identical looking assemblies. I added a 1 on this part. Okay, so this is -1. So focal point, these point to that, and then when I'm in my, here it is, other assembly, this is the assembly where I'm actually building the cluster itself. I don't think I added the, I'm just gonna do that right now. These parts are gonna be the first of what I build for the gauge pod. And a decision there too, you can do a lot of modeling all within a part file, but you can also make an assembly built on any number of parts and assemblies and convert it all to a part later. And the benefit you get from doing that is more control in the CAD software of all the individual components. Trying to make a part in a part is a terrible experience. Yeah. Well, I might be twiddling my thumbs on anything left to say at this point. I think I said what I want to say. The rest is going to be exploration and doing the work and doing what I love with designing things. Setting up the structures based on logic that I choose, and then once I see what I have, adjusting it there. Like you go look at a paint swatch of at the Home Depot or something, the color you want to paint your house, and then you paint it, and then you wish you could change it because it's not what you thought from looking at the swatch. Yeah, good times. Also, everyone's telling me don't go with these old school gauges. You should just connect all your sensors to a digital display. And I guess clearly I'm old school. When I was younger, I saw gauges like this on race cars, and I wanted it. And now that I have them, I want them. And with the logic I have now, there's one thing I can say. For reliability, I certainly do appreciate independent systems. These gauges, though they are all electric, they still boot up, if you will, and get to operating conditions much faster than any, well, I shouldn't say any because I'm not too versed on them, but my experience with digital displays is there's a little more boot time. And then these are truly all independent systems. So if one thing goes down, not all go down. And other people might say as well, a properly tuned car doesn't need any gauges. Well, tell that to the vehicle company I worked for in the past who retrofit their vehicles with a massive amount of sensors in the test engineering department. And that's how I view my hobby here. It's a compound turbo unique vehicle, and I enjoy watching gauges. So I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. So fun project, infinite projects on my car. Although in my old age here, I try to limit downtime. So, car's driving pretty well. And this is just gonna be a nice add-on that I hope to get done sooner than later, but it's one of many projects. Thanks for hanging out.